you've got someone in front of you, you just keep up with their pace and it makes it a lot easier. I just had to slow down and just let them go, but it drive me on for a good 5 or 10 minutes.
Just as long as you're not tailing them too much, otherwise it looks like you're sort of stalking them a bit, eh? Hello everybody and welcome to Peachy Podcast episode 5. Some wonderful guests coming on to keep this thing alive. Today we have Dave the Physio, otherwise known as Dave Adkins. He's a physiotherapist, head physiotherapist shall I say, and business owner at Principal Physiotherapy. How are you doing, Dave?
Very well, thanks for the invite.
Very, very welcome. I hope you enjoy your stay. If you don't, leave a good review or bad review on TripAdvisor. Anyway, we'll get cracking. The first question, pretty much a nice little cheeky warm-up question, and it is very much your ideal COVID-friendly night in. So drink, takeaway, and movie or even TV show of your choice. What are we going for?
Okay, so recently been loving Turkish. So I've been getting a takeaway from, it used to be called Bogaz, but it's called Blaze now, I think.
Oh, yeah, it's a good place.
They do a wrapped lamb baiti, which I love. So I'm always one of them. Watching a lot of Lost recently. So we're doing rewatching the series of Lost. So that's pretty much the night in at the minute. What about yourself?
Well, I suppose going by your haircut, I'd have to say Prison Break at the moment. No, I'm only joking. I've never watched it. Lost, I wouldn't be able to find myself on it. Movie-wise, let's go TV show, actually. I've been watching that Cecil Hotel, or is it Cecil Hotel? And highly advised watching that. It's very good. Although I would say, without breaking too much of it, you get through the whole series and you sort of think they could have summed it all up in one episode, maybe even 10 minutes. But it's very good. There's a lot of twists and turns in there. It's what we like to see. Speaking of twists and turns,
at the minute as well, I bet. Yeah. Well timed. You're watching a lot of West Ham at the minute, I bet.
At the moment, most definitely. I was out in the car park yesterday at work, vividly listening to the score. It was the most nerve-wracking 5 minutes of my life. I looked a bit insane. She's not far from the normal, I suppose. But yeah, fantastic result.
Well. Doing really well at the minute.
Oh yeah, I'm over the moon with that. Absolutely over the moon. Anyway, so first main question to start and kickstart this thing off is, how did you become a physiotherapist? What made you start it and what keeps you motivated to be a physio?
So it all started when I was a kid, when I got injured playing football, went to the physio, and then that just gave me a bit of an insight into what they do. And then after that, that was sort of my goal, to become a physio once. Like, I knew that I wasn't going to become a footballer, so I wanted to be involved, and that was sort of my approach. I never ended up working as a physio with a football team, but that was sort of what initiated it. So what kept me going, I guess, career basically took over. By that point, I was wanting to build a business and kind of have a career of myself. So that's when I set up Principal Physiotherapy. And it's good fun because you're with people all the time, and I enjoy working for myself. So yeah, it drives me on.
And obviously, with your injuries now, a lot of people, as like physiotherapists, they do go into that sort of field, don't they? Because they find quite an intriguement in, you know, how to treat people and sort of how to get people through tough times, through sports injuries, and even a little bit of psychology in there as well. Anyway, enough jibber jabbering from me. So, with regards to COVID and lockdown, how's it impacted your business?
So initially, I went virtual. So we wasn't seeing anybody face to face at the beginning. Partly because we were within a gym, the gym shut, so our clinic shut. And we tried virtually. It wasn't very successful at the beginning, but it gradually built. And that basically got us to spend a lot more time on social media and just putting out free content, really. So with our business model has changed a lot in the last 6 months to a year, because we spend so much more time on social media trying to get content out, and that's brought new revenue. And as time's gone on, we've been able to get access back into our clinic, and now we're seeing people face to face. So it's been a very long road of not seeing too many people to building things back up, and we do a bit of both now. So we see people virtually as well as face to face.
Fantastic. And did you find, like, with this lockdown, it sort of forced you to sort of change almost methods and become a little bit more online based as well?
Yeah, so it's something that I'd dabbled in a little bit, but I was never that comfortable. And within a month or so, I was posting videos on a daily basis. I was starting to do things like this and putting out live content. And yeah, it completely changed my my ability level as well using video, because when I first doing it, I was setting up the camera for ages. I was redoing videos like 1,000 times, whereas now you can start to get videos out quite quickly and there's a lot less pressure on it. Whereas at first you're like, oh God, we need to get this right. Now, because we're posting quite often and you get used to it. So it makes it a lot easier to do, and a lot of trial and error as well. So you've got to try and make it fun. Otherwise it is just, it's just hell just having to keep doing things if you're not enjoying it.
Oh, 100%. I find when I first started filming, I was very uptight the way sort of things had to go, sort of thing. And I think where I was a lot nervous in front of the camera, that nervous energy translated into sort of being quite monotonal. And it is so tough to begin with, isn't it? But I think this is what's so good about this whole lockdown side of things. It's taught us to be more versatile with our skill set and just constantly learn. And I mean, online coaching's obviously it's been around for as long as I remember. But it's just evolved in these past few years. And I think even people who never even dreamed of doing that sort of thing are now almost completely permanently online now. And posting,
everyone's an online coach these days, aren't they?
Oh God, yeah, it's exactly it, isn't it? How have you found with that though? Have you sort of managed to adjust with that? Have you do you find it quite tough dealing with sort of the fact that there's quite a lot more online coaches as well to sort of compete with?
Well, I think you can look at it in two ways. You can look at it as that there's a lot more competition, but I've just tried to make it like an extra string to my bow. So for the people that already followed us, they're now getting additional content. And if we get new followers along the way, then that's a bonus. But yeah, I think you're never going to build a business online just by posting a few videos. You need to have a following. And I'd say start off locally as well, because they're the people that you're likely to get to know better. And I think you're naturally going to grow and go bigger as time goes on, really. But yeah, as long as you're getting good content out there that people find interesting and find useful, then that's the main thing. That's
exactly it, isn't it? Is there any particular hashtags you use to sort of engage the audience at all?
Well, I think we just stick to like types of injuries, location, that sort of thing. I don't know if there's any. We haven't got any sayings yet that we use. Maybe for us today.
You can break out the prison of your injury. We'll think of something like that. So I'm going to keep referencing Prison Break. I've never seen it either. That's the worst bit. What are the most like common injuries you've seen through sort of like lockdown? Like, what is the most common one that, as sort of amongst the population, that you sort of deal with?
So it hasn't really changed in the sense that back and neck pain are the most common. And I think that they're being driven even more so where people are spending a lot more time at home. So people work at their desk all day, or people that are potentially on furlough, they're not getting out and about, they're not doing the small amounts of activity that they would have done before. So I think it's just increased the numbers of people that seek out help, because they're just not getting as active. And then on the opposite side, there's the other half that are going out running and doing exercise so much more than they used to, that you're getting more people with runner's knee and then tendon issues in and around the ankle as well. So it's just sort of polarized people's problems, that they're either not moving enough or moving well too much and doing too much activity. But back and neck pain are the most common.
Yeah, that's crazy, isn't it? I think because I was talking to the chap last week who I had on, and he sort of delegated it down to two people, divided it into two people. Obviously, you get the first person who's sort of gone, it's lockdown, it's just enjoy my life, booze, food and all that sort of jazz, and not so much exercise. And then you've got the other side where they're dedicated, maybe going over the top, too dedicated, do you know what I mean? And sort of going from, one extreme to another, sitting down being a couch potato to then being a roasting potato, if you like, sort of thing.
Yeah, and everyone gets into the like couch to 5Ks and different programs. And if you've never run and then you suddenly get into training, then there's going to be a point at which your body can't handle the amount you're doing. And that's when you get overloaded injuries and overuse injuries, which is, again, mostly what we're getting is either underuse or overuse injuries.
Do you find it's a lot to do with high impact sort of training as well, as opposed to sort of just low impact, steady state sort of training?
Yeah, definitely. Because everyone loves doing the videos on YouTube, and a lot of them are geared up to HIIT training. And again, if you're not used to HIIT training, you're going to be overloading the tissues in your joints and muscles. And yeah, and if that's the only type of training you're doing, you haven't built up that low level strength that you need. And like you said, people that are out walking every day, they probably can handle a bit of HIIT. But if you're not trained and go straight into it, that's when injuries are going to occur.
Yeah, it's a killer, isn't it? It is a massive killer. And I think another thing that's been exposed quite a lot is, like, as you say, mobility issues and such, where you get neck pain and back pain and stuff. Because I feel like a lot of people have gone from being sedentary to then rushing into the sort of HIIT sort of workouts and such. And obviously, as you get older, you need that a little bit more time to stretch, mobilize yourself before you actually crack on with the activity. And I think people just rush into doing a quick 20-minute workout without realizing, I should really do a bit of a warm up first.
Yeah. When they're like half an hour lunch break, they might just do a quick HIIT and then get back to work. And you've been sitting all day, and then suddenly you're doing really high level activity, and then you go and sit for the rest of the afternoon. So there's a real mismatch in level activity that causes problems.
And if you're like when it went down to the first lockdown, I believe you were out of business for a bit, weren't you? In terms of, you went purely online, didn't you, initially? Yeah. How did you sort of train people through that sort of period with regards to sort of obviously treating the sports injuries and such? Because I can imagine that was a lot harder than sort of face-to-face consultation. Yeah,
so it is challenging, just because you don't build a rapport, first of all, with a person as easily through a camera, especially if you've not met them before. And then you can't actually look at the area of the injury and get your hands onto that area either. So you might not be able to notice if there's like mild swelling, or if there's like an issue there that you would see if you were face to face. So you have to go with your judgment of the situation. One of the key things with physio is that you have to have a really good subjective. So that's where you spend the time asking the questions. So if you're really good with your subjective side of things, then it makes everything else easier. If you don't get the information you need, you're probably you're in the dark, really. So it makes it even harder when you haven't got someone in front of you. So yeah, it is a challenge, but it is possible. And we've had some really good success with a number of virtual physio consultations. So it's possible, but it's just not as easy.
100%. And what's been your biggest challenge during this whole sort of pandemic, like for your own sport, for your own actual training?
Well, the motivation, I think, at first, because I'm used to being in a gym or playing football, so it's easy to be motivated there. But when you're at home and you haven't got access to what you normally do, that was definitely a challenge. So I took some of the equipment home, trained at home, and just tried to get out for a run. I think the good thing was, because the weather was good, we were getting out a lot more. This lockdown, the weather's been a bit crap, so it's not been as easy to get out for a run or be motivated. So yeah, motivation's always been tough through lockdown, but you just got to try and, if you didn't do something yesterday, just do something today, and then just get started again. Yeah,
it's almost like not necessarily going easy on yourself, but sort of still trying to do something, persisting through. But if it perhaps isn't as good a session as it would be in the gym, sort of giving yourself a little bit of empathy and understanding, isn't it, as to what the difference is. I found when I sort of obviously went from training in a gym to then obviously training at home sort of thing, it was such a huge difference. And I think the main factor was atmosphere, and just having people around you who want to better themselves. And it's almost like that sort of power of self-improvement. If you're amongst people that are improving themselves and working on themselves, it motivates you to do the exact same thing and almost keep up with their work rate, isn't it? And that's been a huge factor, I think, in a lot of people's training. That's why I've become a bit of a Strava wanker. I've just been out on the old runs every now and then. You see a lot of people and you're like, oh, good, try and keep up with them.
If you've got someone in front of you, you just keep up with their pace, and it makes it a lot easier. I did that a few times, and it was frustrating because their pace was really high, and I just had to slow down and just let them go. But it drove me on for a good 5 or 10 minutes, and yeah, it was good. It just felt like I was having a race.
Yeah, just as long as you're not tailing them too much, otherwise it looks like you're sort of stalking them a bit, eh?
Well, luckily it's on the same route, but yeah, you're right.
Jack the Ripper, COVID version.
Especially with the haircut as well.
Squeaky clean, love it. Obviously, we spoke about neck pain, and this one goes out to my mate Barney. He really asked this question as well. He's getting a lot of neck pain. Obviously, prior to lockdown, he was in the gym. He was doing a lot of heavy lifting. He was doing one thing that I find intriguing, also probably not the most recommended thing to do. He was using a weighted belt, to sort of support his transverse abdominis when he does his deadlift. But he used it consistently, so all the time. And I think in time, he sort of started to develop neck pain. And the question is, and I know you've put it out in your Insta, but for those guys who haven't seen it, like, what are the common causes of neck pain and how would you treat it?
Okay. So you could have a specific cause of your neck pain. So you could have injured something. You might have injured a muscle or the joint, or you might have had a fracture in your neck. So that could be one specific cause. But it's not very often that happens. It's normally it normally comes on gradually, and it comes on through no mechanism of injury. You haven't had a fall or a trip. And it's normally caused by multiple factors. So it could be that you're sat at your desk for long periods of the day, or you could have had like a certain training regime for, say, 6 to 12 weeks that has gradually aggravated your neck. Maybe when you do your deadlifts, you've got your head tilted back, so that every time you do the deadlift, you're overworking your neck muscles. So then it comes on gradually and is caused by different factors, and it all builds up to become the problem. And that's why sometimes people will be looking for that one, what is it that's caused my neck problem? And there's not always an easy answer. So that's why I was saying earlier about the subjective assessment is really important, because then you can get a picture of someone's lifestyle, and then you can start to build an understanding of what was it that caused it. So for someone that trains in the gym, it could well be that their technique is overworking certain areas of their neck. It might be that they're training too often. It might be they're lifting too much weight for their body's ability, and that might be driving their pain. And that's something you can find out through that sort of question and answer session. Obviously, with age as well, if you've got an older person, then you've got to consider that arthritis might be a factor, and that's something where you get inflammation within joints, and then joints can sometimes change shape and get bony overgrowth, and from time to time that might flare up and cause pain in the neck. Treatment would usually be resting from the aggravating activities, trying to keep your neck moving. So we'd often give exercises that are going to help to increase flexibility, reduce tension, and reduce pain. So that could be simply just doing neck exercise where you're bringing your head up and down, rotation, and then side bending. So you might do that on an hourly basis for a few weeks just to try and loosen the neck off. Treatment, if they're coming to physio, then they might get some hands-on treatment. So you might try and mobilize certain tissues, whether that's the joints, or you might do some soft tissue work into the muscles, and then that can reduce their pain levels as well. So yeah, you've got to find out what the cause is, and that's normally a few different things that you can get them to adjust in either their training or their posture at work or the amount of time they're sitting. And then the treatment could be that sort of stuff as well. So the treatment could be getting them to be sitting in a better position in their chair, getting up more regularly. That could be part of the treatment. And then the other half of it is what we do in the clinic room, where we would treat their neck and potentially treat other areas of the body as well to overcome the problem. One other factor that I didn't mention is strength. So if someone's got weakness in their upper traps, or if in the back of the neck, then we might decide to do some strengthening exercises that could overcome the problem as well.
Brilliant. Additionally as well, and I feel like this is one that's quite common. I mean, where I work, it can be quite busy. It can be sort of like quite quiet. And when it's quiet, obviously quite a few of us are quite active. So we get press ups done. We do a couple of pull ups. And one thing I really noticed is the amount of times, especially at work, where they've complained about having shoulder issues after a while, because I've been doing like the 25 sort of press ups on the hour, sort of every hour sort of thing. Then I'm doing like 100, 150 a day. And they go, oh, I've got a niggly shoulder. That's normally rotator cuff, right? What would you say to those sort of guys? And how would you sort of treat that sort of rotator cuff injury?
Okay, that's a good one. So yeah, rotator cuff issues occur quite often with like push exercises, so like shoulder press or bench press or too many press ups, and that could you could just work the rotator cuff muscles on their own to strengthen them up to be able to handle the amount of press ups you're doing. The other side of it would be to reduce the amount of press ups you do to allow your rotator cuff muscles to recover, because they tend to be the muscle groups that people love to train is the chest and the shoulders, because they're the most obvious areas you can show off with a vest. People don't like to stop their training, so especially gym goers, trying to get them to reduce their activity levels is quite tough because they lose their gains and they lose their muscle mass. And that's why people tend to just keep training on with it, because it tends to be a niggle and they can just like work around it or work through it, maybe position their arms in a slightly better position and it doesn't hurt so much. But they're just hiding the problem and they're just going to end up with more of a bigger issue later on. So if you can nip it in the bud early, reduce how many reps you're doing in the short term, build up your rotator cuff strength, and also have a more rounded program. So if you're doing 100 press ups, you need to be doing 100 rows or something like that, so that you've got you don't have a muscle imbalance. So yeah,
I found really good with the rotator cuff because I had a rotator cuff issue 6 years ago now, and it taught me a hell of a lot about sort of like the sort of imbalance in my sort of posture. Obviously, I was one of those every day, a chest day, beach body sort of workout kind of guys. I loved doing the same things over and over again. And obviously, after a while, it just caused my shoulders to sort of rotate forward. I ended up like the hunchback in Notre Dame, and that was a nightmare. I also did a lot of foam rolling as well, and I found that was quite beneficial. But what would you say to that? Would you say that's something they should do, or is it something that's almost optional to reduce tightness around that area?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of debate into whether foam rolling is useful. I think that if you're using foam rolling as a adjunct, so something additional to your training, then great, like use it. If it helps you, then go for it. Some people spend too much time worrying about the foam rolling, so they don't actually do some of the more effective stuff in their training. So if you've got a shoulder problem and you'll do bench press, you'll get some pain, so you foam roll your shoulder and then go straight back to bench press, it's probably just going to mask the issue. But if you change your training so that it's more effective, so a bit more of a balanced training program, more back and do your rotator cuff exercises, using the foam roller in addition to that is great. Just don't use it as the sole way of getting past your problem. But yeah, it has its benefits, but it also has its limitations. If you're trying to break down tissue, or if you're trying to lengthen tissue with the foam roller, you're probably not going to get very far, but it can be really good for pain relief, and it can be good for reducing tension in the short term.
Good, excellent. Moving on to the next bit, nutrition. So obviously, the chap I spoke to last week, he was very heavy on nutrition. Before anyone he sort of like does online consultations or online coaching with, and even like his PT clients as well. He's always heavy on getting their nutrition sorted before they start any sort of program. He has the belief, and I do believe my sort of beliefs correlate with his as well. A lot of people will get into a training routine and wholeheartedly put 110% in their training, but not so much in their nutrition. And they almost try and out-train a bad diet. What would you say with regards to that? So like an injury sort of rehabilitation, what would be the foods you'd avoid? And then the foods that you'd sort of do to aid your recovery?
Okay, so I don't think that the advice changes dramatically. I think my expertise isn't in nutrition, so I wouldn't be able to give you specifics of how much you should be eating of certain things during an injury. But if you think about why we eat certain foods for exercise, carbohydrates and proteins are important for energy and for repair and growth. So it's the same principles when it comes to an injury. If you want to repair and grow well, you want to make sure that you've got adequate protein in your diet, and you're going to need a certain amount of energy to be able to to train and do your rehabilitation. So you need your carbohydrates, your healthy fats, and you can have sugar, but you just don't want to be having excessive levels of sugar in your diet. You don't want to be having excessive levels of saturates in your diet. If you're looking for supplementation advice, then I'd always refer people onto a nutritionist, because they can be much more specific, or a dietitian. They can be more specific to that individual, and they may find that they've got, where they haven't got enough in their system. So then they can advise them, oh, you need to be taking this supplement. Partly because I don't have that level of expertise, I don't give in-depth advice about nutrition. I just give more of a general overview and refer people on to nutritionists to get that expert advice. It's a bit like a nutritionist giving injury advice to someone. They're probably not well placed for it unless they've done additional qualifications. So they would refer to a physio. So I probably wouldn't want to tread on people's toes there. And it has to be individualized, I think. It can't just, you can't just throw the same advice at everyone who's got an injury to eat this and take these supplements. It has to be personal to them.
Definitely. I agree with that. Good, nice little honest answer. I like that. Finally, closing in on the last little bit. So I'll touch upon it now, and then obviously I'll sort of ask the question. But I think one of the massive things, especially for myself when I had my injury, was I had a massive decline in sort of like my sort of psyche and my sort of emotional, mental sort of health side of things. And I feel like a lot of people have had the same thing, you know, injury or no injury, through lockdown, and, you know, their training may be going down, maybe the gains have sort of like not necessarily disappeared, but they've sort of maybe fluctuated from being in and out of the gym, motivation wise. And especially through long-term injuries, I find a lot of people's sort of mentality just completely declines. If they're not looked out for and looked after. And I feel like that can actually cause injuries as well, having sort of like a high stress job, or even just feeling more fatigued, not getting enough sleep, maybe not having an actual sort of work sort of training pattern as such. I'm blabbering a bit here. But what advice would you give to sort of athletes and ordinary people dealing with a sort of long-term / chronic injury with regards to sort of psychological interventions?
Yes, big question. So, like you said, psychology has an impact on your physiology as well. So it can lead to pain and injury. So if you have high levels of stress, then you're more likely to get injured. And research has shown that as well. When students are studying for exams, their injury rate goes up. So there is a link between stress, depression, that sort of thing on the physical body. If someone suffers an injury, then they tend to be able to deal with the injury itself, but it's the knock-on effect it has to their life. So if you're a runner and you get injured, you suddenly can't run. And people run for a reason. So they're running because it boosts their mood, it boosts their, it maybe gets rid of some of their anxiety or depression. And as soon as you take away the running because of the injury, then their psychological issues increase. So they become more depressed, more anxious, and it becomes a spiral, because when you're injured, you become focused on the problem rather than focusing on all the positives that could be going on in your life. So what I would say is, as soon as you have an injury, you need to create a plan for yourself and focus on the things that you can control. So when I get somebody in, the first thing I'll ask them is, what do you want to achieve? And that straight away, that focuses their mind on what they want to achieve rather than what they can't do. Because the more and more you focus on what you can't do, the more unhappy you'll be. So you need to identify what it is you want to achieve through your rehab, and then you need to set yourself small goals, so short, medium, long-term goals that you're going to work towards, because that's going to give you satisfaction that you're starting to achieve again. You might not be able to achieve your running distances that you're looking to do if you're an athlete or playing sport. You may not be able to be getting the minutes on the pitch, but as long as you have something in place where you've got a goal and you've got a target, then that's going to improve your mood. It's difficult if you're in that state as well. Like, again, I'm not a psychologist, so the best thing to do is, if you're really depressed, speak to somebody, speak to a counsellor, speak to a psychologist, because that's their profession, that's their expertise. So they're going to be able to help you if you're not able to help yourself. So my simple advice would be get advice and get some support if you're struggling with depression, anxiety, or can't manage your injury. But physio is fantastic for helping people with that problem, because we will help them set their goals and give them something to work towards. I've always found when I've been injured, that's when I've been most motivated, actually, because when I'm playing sport, it just comes naturally. You just go on the pitch, as long as you've got a good fitness level, you can play. But it's when you're injured, that's when I'm most motivated to try and get back to doing what I want to do. So just always keep your goal in mind, what you want to achieve.
I guess that, to be fair as well with yourself, it's probably the most ideal sort of way to get injured, really, isn't it? Because you can treat yourself anyway.
I've learned a lot of ways to treat other people through my injuries as well. So yeah. It help.
It's amazing, that experience. That's the thing. You may be injured, but you're gaining that experience. There is no losing. It's just learning. That's my quote of the day.
That's very true.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Dave, for coming on. I really appreciate your time. Guys, I will leave Dave's details in the comment section or the description. I haven't decided yet, or maybe both. I might be treating him. Feel free to follow him at Principal Physiotherapy. That's right, isn't it?
That's right.
There we go. I've got that one. And also ignore the fact that he's an Arsenal fan. He's actually a really nice chap. Any closing words, Dave?
No, just thanks for inviting me on. It's been good to see you and good to catch up. And I'm really impressed with all of your social media as well. So keep it going, mate.
Thank you very much, buddy. Thank you very much.